Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of Our Three Cents. Continuing on with what we started last week.
Part 2 of our 3-part series on the original Batman trilogy, Batman Returns.
You know, this one has always kind of been the black sheep of the Batman family of movies.
Up until Batman and Robin.
No, because that one doesn't exist, remember?
Well, I know that, but
No.
not everybody feels the same way we do.
Well, you should. I don't know. I've always kind of considered it the outcast. You know, people talk about Batman movies, and you'll hear people talk a lot about Batman '89 and the Christopher Nolan series, and even Batman Forever, but Batman Returns always kind of gets looked over,
Mm-hmm.
I felt. And it shouldn't, although even we've done it, because, I mean, I was telling him right before we started, you know, I haven't seen this movie in probably 8 years, maybe. It's been a long time since I've seen it, and I've forgotten how much I liked it.
It is the quintessential middle child.
Yes, it
To make
is.
a good comparison.
Yeah.
Anyway, Batman Returns, yeah.
Yep.
Still a great movie.
Very good. Very, very good.
As much as I love it, I don't want to say that it holds up as well as the first one. It's real close,
Very close.
but as like you were mentioning, it's kind of the black sheep.
Yeah. And, you know, as I was watching it, I think that I figured out why. You know, a lot of people kind of overlook this one. A lot of people think that it's a lot darker, and my mom always described this movie as gross. That was always her word for it. But I think what it really is the first one did so well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was so accepted. Everybody loved it. That the studio just kind of gave Tim Burton free reign, and that was a big part of it. This movie is just, Tim Burton just threw up all over this movie. You know?
It screams
Oh yeah.
Tim Burton.
The costumes, the architecture, the style of everything. It's so ridiculous. You know?
They took what he did in the first one and just like kicked it up like 20 notches or something.
Oh yeah, you know, the first one he was almost going for a realistic Gotham. This is a fantasy Gotham in a lot of ways. Not to the extent of Batman Forever or that other movie that we don't talk of.
The bastard child of
Yeah.
Joel Schumacher.
But it's ridiculous, just how big everything is, the statues, the zoo.
Which was terrifying.
Oh my gosh. I would have nightmares if I went and saw a zoo like that when I was a kid. But I think that that's what it is. It stands out so much because of that people almost push it away.
But it is, I mean, it is Tim Burton. It is his style.
Yeah.
If you look at Edward Scissorhands right before it, it's kind of similar, with the exception of this is a lot darker palette
Mhm.
than Edward Scissorhands. Edward Scissorhands was all pastels and happy-go-lucky.
Yeah, because he was trying to make that mixture of throwing a dark element into this happiness.
Yeah.
And this is
Very, very dark.
yeah.
Very dark.
Oh gosh, yes.
But again, I mean, that's his style. He has a dark sense. He does a dark sense of what do they call it? Brooding.
Brooding.
Yeah, and that's what it is. Every one of his movies has that element. It's just with little tweaks thrown in here and there
Mm-hmm.
to make
Yeah.
each one different, but it's still
There's
a lot of the same.
Yeah, there's always a sense of darkness with. There's almost always one instance in every one of his movies where there's a splash of either color or happiness, but it's always just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like Sweeney Todd, that whole beach sequence,
Yeah.
which what the hell was that about, really? But anyway,
That was blinding, is what that was.
yeah.
Interesting.
But it had Helena Bonham Carter in a bikini, so I was okay with it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So,
back on topic.
one of the things that I found that I really liked about this movie, especially watching it again after so long, it's really funny.
Yeah.
It's like dark comedy, it's almost like a black comedy,
Yeah, it truly is.
but it's so funny and so sexually charged.
Oh yeah. That seemed to be really what he was going for with
Yeah.
this whole movie, because it's just like this slow tension that just builds and builds and builds. I had a thought on this movie as I was watching it, that a lot of people think about the first Batman and what a huge change it was and how dark it was. And while I agree with that, it was. But this is the movie that kind of hit the bottom, in a sense of how dark you can make a movie before it almost becomes too much.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's something I was going to talk about in the last video, but I forgot to. Kind of the timeline that we're talking about with Batman here, we came from the 60s show, which was cheesy, campy, full of bright colors. And Tim Burton decided to do something different. But even with that first one, while it was dark in tone and palette and the way it was shot, there was still a little bit of campiness in its elements in some of the dialogue and things like that. This one is drastically different in the sense that there is no real campiness in it whatsoever. There's some comedy, like you said, but I would honestly say that this is probably one of the most well written out of all of the Batman movies. The dialogue is smart. It's a little bit sarcastic. There's some comedy to it. But at the same time, there's some really good stuff in there talking about, between Batman and Catwoman, talking about their masks and how they need to remove them and how they don't know who they really are. Stuff that...
The duality of man.
Yeah.
Which is something that's a running theme throughout every single Batman movie there is, because that's that inner struggle that he has.
Yeah, but I thought this one did it best.
Yeah.
Because it's the first time that there's a love interest that has been appealing to both Bruce Wayne and Batman.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know that it's the same person,
Until
that pivotal moment.
Where they're talking about mistletoe,
Uh-huh.
and each person says the other person's line. And I just thought the best part of that was, she starts crying and says, okay, do we have to start fighting each other now?
Yeah.
Because they both realize who the other person is and who the other person is.
Yeah. Such a beautiful scene.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that was one of the things that I really liked about The Dark Knight Rises, is that they put that scene back in there, although it is very different. It's just a regular dance in The Dark Knight Rises, and the masquerade scene they used for another character, but they paid an homage to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that, because that is... I didn't realize it until I watched this again, because it's been so long since I've seen it. I think that that's probably one of my favorite parts out of any of the Batman movies, is that scene, because it was so well written, and just beautifully done. Very nicely
Plus,
shot.
for being in a masquerade ball, they're the only two that are not wearing a mask.
Yeah. Yeah.
And knowing what we know as saints, having seen it, it makes it that much more powerful that they're not wearing masks, especially with the conversation that they've had previously,
Mm-hmm.
both as Selina and Bruce and Catwoman and Batman.
Yes. Very much so.
So the cast in this is,
Top notch.
oh yeah. Again, Michael Keaton returns as Bruce Wayne Batman. We also have Danny DeVito as the Penguin / Oswald Cobblepot.
Another surprise casting
Mm-hmm.
from Tim Burton. Tim Burton really just wanted to tell Batman, just kind of give a big F you to Batman fans and be like, I know what I'm doing. You know?
Michelle Pfeiffer as Selina Kyle / Catwoman.
Mm-hmm.
We can go on for hours on this, but we'll come back to that, but not go hours on it. Who else we had? Christopher Walken.
Christopher Walken, the incomparable Mr. Walken,
Yes.
as the other villain.
Yeah.
Not a traditional Batman villain, but still a villain in this movie,
And-
as Max Schreck.
And I'd like to say that this movie did something well that I don't think some of the other Batmans pulled off quite as good. Like, they had multiple villains.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Batman, the original Batman was the only movie that had one single villain.
Yeah.
Every other one had
At
two
least.
or more villains. And that's,
Even the Christopher Nolan series, if you really think about it.
yes, all three of them
Yep.
had multiple villains. And the way they were able to intertwine the stories, especially, we've been saying about Catwoman a lot, especially with Catwoman, because it's almost like she could go either way. And there was multiple instances where you would think that if you hadn't seen this before, that she is deep down, she wants to be a good person, but she's so crazy and has been scorned for so long as Selina Kyle.
That she feels that she has to be a villain.
Yeah,
And
she
that
just
seemed,
loses it.
that seemed to be what it was to me. It's that it was almost an unconscious decision for her to become Catwoman.
Yeah. We
She
shot
wasn't.
her out of that window.
Hmm. It's almost like she realized, okay, I'm almost meant to be a villain, and I have to, even if I don't want to.
I think Michelle Pfeiffer, much better Catwoman than Anne Hathaway. My own personal opinion. Now, granted, I watched these movies when I was younger, and so it kind of stuck with me.
There's a nostalgic value to it, and I've always felt that I'm one that can look past nostalgia value in movies, and I would still agree with you. I think she is the best. Michelle Pfeiffer was the best. Anne Hathaway was great, don't get me wrong. I thought she was fantastic in Dark Knight Rises. But it was a little bit of a different take on Catwoman. I thought that this worked because it felt a little more grounded, and the relationship between her and Bruce / her and Batman kind of came about naturally and gradually, and it worked. And I think I think a big part of it was just the chemistry between Michael Keaton and Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah.
They had a really great charged chemistry between them.
And I also think that, and I'm going to go back with it, I think she played very well the inner struggle that she had. That really was portrayed on screen very well.
Oh yeah.
I agree. I think that was pretty much all the main cast we had that was of any note.
Yeah, Michael Gough, of course, returns as Alfred, and
Paul Rubin makes a very short cameo in it
I always forget that.
as Penguin's father.
I always forget that he played that. I always.
Which is another Tim Burton tie-in.
Yep. Yep.
Pee-wee's Big Adventure. First time I saw this movie, I can remember specifically we were in a hotel in Iowa, Kansas in 1993.
I was in 5th grade. I was in 5th grade when we moved to Iowa.
So I remember watching it, and like you said, Mom's like, that movie's gross. I was like, no, this movie is good.
Yeah. Was I there on that trip?
But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't have been home by yourself. But,
I just don't remember. But there you go.
and I don't remember what your first memory of watching this was, but I've been teasing with you that I've had this great story for 2 weeks now
Yep.
about when you wanted to see, about the first time. I don't specifically remember this, but Mom tells me this story, that you and Gary were going to go see it in the theater. Gary's parents were going to take you to see it.
That
You
sounds
came
about
and
right.
asked Mom if you could go and see it. Mom said no. For good reason. Now, looking back at it, because it is a little intense for an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
But you told her, but Mom, it's only rated PG-13 for violence. Regular violence, not graphic violence. That's always has stuck with me all these years. How funny that was.
Oh, yeah, I don't remember that, but that sounds very accurate.
This is something you would say.
Well, yeah, that does sound like something I would say, and it sounds like something I would do, because Gary's parents would have taken me to the theater to see it. My friend Gary's house was where I saw all the movies that Mom and Dad wouldn't allow me to see. Gary's the one that got me into horror movies, you know? He's the one that got me started on the whole path. I went over to his house to watch movies, because his parents didn't care what we watched. And they would rent them for us, you know? And now I don't really have any memories of this movie from when I was younger. Not that I remember, you know? I just remember always liking this movie because it was dark and a little bit gross, and, you know, I was a little kid, I liked that. So, but you know, now I can see my appeal in it as a kid, that it was different and it always stood out to me. And there was a reason for it, because there's a lot of watch it again. Which is one of the great things about watching movies from your childhood as an adult.
Yep. You need to pick up on all kinds of new things.
Can we talk about Danny DeVito as the Penguin for a minute? Just wow. I mean, you know, obviously I don't, you know, I didn't know what was going on as a kid, but I can imagine that this was another one of those casting decisions that had a lot of people scratching their head and asking what the hell, because, you know, Danny DeVito, really?
Yeah.
As a villain?
Yeah,
I mean, thinking on it now, even I'm still to this day surprised, because, you know, he's again another person that's known for comedies. And he comes to do this role, and he just knocks it out of the park. He really does. He plays it serious and intent, but with a very open sense of humor, you know, throughout the movie. You know, he's cracking a lot of jokes. He's, you know,
horny as all get out.
Horny as all get out, yeah. But he plays it very subtly in a lot of ways, you know. But then there near the end, after his mayoral bid goes down the drain, he just loses it.
Snaps.
and such a
It
great.
just goes batshit crazy.
Oh yeah, and again another villain from, and this must have just been a Tim Burton thing, had a great introduction.
Mm-hmm.
You know, besides the introduction with him as a kid, after that when he makes his first appearance, all you just see his shadow throughout the sewer.
Or you see his hands.
Yes, there was a lot of shots of just his hands, like grabbing the grates, the city grates, and peering out into Gotham City. Just a fantastic introduction.
And then something that's always stuck in my mind, the ending.
Oh yeah.
Penguin's funeral is like one of the most powerful things that I've seen in a comic book movie.
Oh, absolutely.
Ever.
Absolutely.
You have 6 king penguins dragging his body down a ramp into a lake, like looking like pallbearers, all dressed up in tuxedos. It's so beautiful.
Oh gosh, yes.
And Batman is just looking on and just doesn't say anything.
Yeah. You know, nothing that needs to be said. Just, oh yeah, I agree. That's always an image that's stuck with me.
It's just, it's so intense and just so, just the perfect ending to that character.
Oh yeah.
Especially considering he calls the penguins his children,
Mm-hmm.
and he shows more love for those penguins than he does for anything. That's because that's the only thing he's ever had is penguins.
Mm-hmm.
So
Penguins found him when he was a baby and raised him.
I think it was just magnifique.
Oh yeah. It makes watching the ending of that movie, not the Penguin's funeral, but the actual ending, very, very last scene,
Yeah.
makes me wonder what would have come about if Tim Burton had been allowed the third one.
Yeah.
You know, because Batman and Catwoman know who each other are, and Catwoman still had 1 life left. She only used 8.
I think it would have been a continuation of the story, an eventual build up to them getting together
Mm-hmm.
and having children,
Yep. And
which is what Birds of Prey was.
yep. But yeah, it just I would have liked for Tim Burton to be able to have one more, because I think I've heard him say in an interview that he was planning 3 of them. You know, that he wanted to do 3, but this one just didn't do as well in the theater. You know, it just, people didn't accept it as much as the first one, so they cut him out and they passed it on to
The person who essentially ruined the franchise until Christopher Nolan came back,
yeah.
almost 20 years later,
Yeah.
97 to 05.
Yep.
Yeah. No, 10 years later.
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah, it's 11:30 at night. I can't math today. So, going with that, we should cut it down.
Yeah.
Tune back next week for a final in our Batman original trilogy series. We get a new Batman, a new director,
He didn't completely ruin this one though.
a new
Everything.
everything.
Yeah.
See you next week. Blessed be.